Hello, today is Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. I'm Joe Schmidt with TC2, and this is Staying Connected. This is part 2 of our 2-part podcast series where we're taking a look at adopting a portfolio strategy when buying internet transport services in the enterprise. As we discussed in part 1, companies are re-architecting their networks, and they're using more internet services as a primary communications technology, and some are using a portfolio strategy for buying the internet transport services. I'm again joined by Mark Sheard, TC2 UK's Managing Director, and we're going to pick up our discussion and let you know how you can actually make this portfolio strategy work. Okay, Mark, welcome back. How about if you explain what companies need to do to successfully use the portfolio strategy?
Okay, thanks, Joe. Well, it's good to be back first. To take forward and successfully use the portfolio strategy, there are a few things that enterprises need to do. First, they need to develop a leverage situation in order to select their portfolio partners, to allow them to compare them and allow them to align those partner or prospective partner offerings to best fit with that enterprise's specific needs. The best way to do this is via a structured RFP, which clearly lays out how you will operate going forward in terms of each bidder is competing for a place as one of your portfolio partners. So there's no misunderstandings. And that the share of business that bidder will get, the circuit awards they're going to get now and in the future, so how big their share will be directly linked to what they do in terms of the price, the provisioning, and the service performance as they go through the contract term. It will also, in that RFP, include key conditions that will provide for flexibility, the flexibility that the enterprise requires to make the most of their chosen suppliers. In doing so, it's going to give the suppliers the opportunity to sign up to the best practice positions on circuit commitment, the SLAs that matter, and on commercial terms.
With so many possible suppliers, how does a company decide who to include or exclude?
That's an excellent question. We take and recommend and have successfully used what I like to call a triage approach, which is basically taking a reasonably large field of potential suppliers who are the first suppliers in the mix and whittling those down very quickly to the most likely candidates. And here, our assessment is largely done on a cost and coverage modeling with a few high level but nevertheless key requirements in the responses. And this can lead to early elimination of some of that bigger pool of suppliers and allow you then to quickly get down to focusing on the ones that will have the biggest potential positive impact on you as an enterprise, and quickly also avoid the ones that are going to be difficult to work with or maybe want to impose unreasonable conditions. An example here is a supplier that's trying to make their pricing conditional on whole award, for example. That's certainly something you don't need to have with an internet transport portfolio strategy. What you would then do is gather and model all the data and explore the various supplier mix scenarios. So I'm really now focusing on this smaller subset of likely candidates and assess which of those suppliers are going to materially impact the outcomes and which don't. And this is important because it's going to be, surprisingly, it can be extremely revealing from the gut feel assessment people have done in the past when they look at a big field of data. This is very much more specific and clinical. Once you've done that, you can then focus any sort of deep dive review in terms of support capabilities, alignment with terms, just how they're going to operate commercially on the most likely candidates. But this phase isn't just about squeezing on price. Your scenario modeling is going to allow a lot of that to be addressed through the total cost optimization across the different bidders. But it's also about concentrating on the requirements that matter. Hence, supplier coaching can be very targeted and focused and can be progressed quickly. And then the final phase of it is really when you're looking at the contracting. And here you definitely have an overhead compared to single supplier because naturally you've got to conclude more supplier contracts. The key is keeping it real and then take steps to mitigate that by really sticking to the principles that matter, the things that are going to affect your service going forward. Addressed in part by having rigorous upfront briefings of suppliers and also in the preparation of the RFP requirements to call out what is really important to you and make that count in the RFP and in the review process. That work in clarifying responses, getting omissions and ambiguities and just plain bad responses addressed very early in the process will pay off in the speed of contracting when you've got a few suppliers to work with.
Okay, so once all of those things are done, presumably everyone is happy, you have a great relationship with your partners, you have solid contracts, and the company has made some really significant reductions in the total cost of its inventory. So what's next?
Two parts really. First, you've got to make sure you monitor and track the initial orders that you allocate to these different suppliers and that they align with the RFP in terms of the offer pricing, the discounts and waivers, etc. Typically, I have to say, supplier account teams really want to make this happen. And my experience is that if you point out these challenges or omissions or errors, they will rapidly work to address disconnects and errors, that may have arisen because the supplier pricing or order progression guy wasn't familiar with the RFP offer detail. Regardless, you need to be vigilant. It's a truism that this isn't something that just applies to whether you've got multiple suppliers. It applies whether you've got one, several, or many. But with the portfolio approach, you have the added advantage that because you have a group of partners, if one is not performing even at this stage, you have the ability to dynamically reallocate, i.e. give circuits to someone else that provisionally is awarded to one supplier. If that supplier is, for example, reneging on price, proving to be difficult in contract closure or in signing up to the terms that they had committed to, or is just poor performing in terms of turning around quotes or orders or planned delivery, for example. And this is a big bonus if used correctly. The second part of this is once you've got through the initial allocation and rollout with your portfolio partners, like anything that's worth having, it's worth looking after. And you have to take steps to look after that arrangement going forward through the term of the contract.
So what sort of things should an enterprise be thinking about?
So in this sort of the day two scenario, one of the biggest pitfalls I see is where after successfully building this credible portfolio and sorting out a great initial allocation and making the saves, the portfolio is then not used properly going forward. You have to make sure that ordering of circuits going forward, and often this can be passed out to somebody who's not to do with the RFP or is an initial rollout project team. It can be networking teams or regional contacts. You have to make sure that those people, the people actioning the relationship in the steady state with suppliers, know about the portfolio once you've created it and that they actually use it. And this can be done with some simple education and, I guess, high-level operating principles. Always quote with the applicable partners for a region. So one circuit, 2 or 3 quotes. And have basic measures put in place to track the circuit awards and allocations so you can see who's got what and have some reference point for going back to say, well, how have they done and how is their performance stacking up? To support this, what I would say is best practice is to build in an annual checkpoint to assess that performance, to review the pricing, particularly to address any anomalies, new requirements, or resetting of older pricing perhaps that you've got across your suppliers if you've had some circuits for a period of time. There are some techniques to this that mean it doesn't have to be high overhead, but I can assure you it can be very effective. So that sort of just keeps it honest, on point going through the year. And then the final part I would say is remember that this is a cycle. It's a 3-year cycle, and eventually you have to reset for greatest benefit. And I can definitely say you see people that win business and try to creep the pricing. This portfolio approach can help you legislate against that. But regardless, at the 3-year point, enterprises should again execute an RFP to select their partners for the next 3 years. And that enterprise shouldn't be afraid to cycle out an underperformer or somebody who's been, not living up to expectations, and perhaps bring someone else in to enhance the mix going forward who's better suited at that point in time to be a portfolio partner.
So Mark, we are about out of time. Do you have any final thoughts?
I guess the thing I'd point out is with many day-to-day operational and other business pressures that IT and sourcing organizations have, arrangements are never going to be perfect. But with some simple husbandry built around this portfolio strategy, enterprises can leverage their provider portfolios to keep their transport sourcing and their pricing largely on point throughout the whole term and gain a far, far better total cost position than they might otherwise have done, and have some mechanisms to help address performance challenges that you might see with a single supplier relationship while not having the same management challenges that you would have with many suppliers. And it's a way that you can actually, while you have slightly more supplier oversight, that visibility and ability to put those providers against each other in a positive way can help the enterprise. And as I've said all the way, this portfolio strategy, the key thing is remember it's going to, likely to have delivered significant cost savings and or bandwidth gain along the way.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Great stuff. If you'd like to learn more about developing a portfolio strategy for your internet transport services, or if you have other ICT lifecycle questions, you can contact Mark, me, or any of our LB3 and TC2 colleagues by giving us a call or sending us an email. You can also stay current by subscribing to Staying Connected, taking a look at our websites, or follow us on LinkedIn.